Study author Samuel Cheyenne, a materials scientist, says this smart glass is cheaper than others, and uses minimal power, much less, for example, than something like a curling iron, and since it's flexible and foldable, he says it could even be used for things like camouflage uniforms, to switch, for example, from green and brown to white and gray. The brain is divided into its hemispheres by a prominent groove. At the base of this lies nerve fibers which enable these two halves of the brain to communicate with each other, but the left hemisphere usually controls movement and sensation in the right side of the body, while the right hemisphere similarly controls the left side of the body. This study marks the first time scientists have linked dike formation to large, damaging earthquakes, and war. There is looking back through history for more examples. She says researchers will never be able to predict exactly when an earthquake might strike after a dike intrusion, but at least now, researchers and rift zone residents know they're not just in for bangs, they may also be in for shudders. Australians do speak English. However, for some tourists and travelers, it can be difficult to understand the slang. Also, the links between Australian and American English were seen to be very tenuous. At least some colloquialisms in Australian English do not exist in other types of English. Trump has threatened to declare China a currency manipulator, but experts say he has little legal or economic basis to take such a step. He has also threatened to impose a tariff of up to 45% on Chinese imports if Beijing doesn't behave, a move that could lead to a trade war and damage the economies of both nations. Each tube-shaped microbot is a sandwich of three materials. A graphene outer layer, which binds to heavy metals. A middle layer of nickel, which gives the bots magnetic polarity, so they can be pulled through wastewater with magnets. And platinum inside for propulsion. Just add a bit of peroxide to the wastewater, and it'll react with the platinum to form water and oxygen bubbles, which propel the tubes along. By beginning so early, he knows that he has plenty of time to do thoroughly all the work he can be expected to do. All his work having been finished in good time, he has a long interval of rest in the evening before the timely hour when he goes to bed. After a sound night's rest, he rises early next morning in good health and spirits for the labors of a new day. Legal writing is usually less discursive than writing in other humanities subjects, and precision is more important than variety. Sentence structure should not be too complex. It is usually unnecessary to make extensive use of adjectives or adverbs, and consistency of terms is often required. Tesla came over from Graz and went to work for Thomas Edison. Nonetheless, Edison offered him a job, promising Tesla $50,000 if Tesla could redesign Edison's breakdown-prone DC generator designs. The new generator designs were a vast improvement over Edison's originals. Upon completing the job, Tesla went to Edison to collect the $50,000 promised for the task. Edison replied, "You don't understand our American humor." And Tesla was never paid. These two men became arch rivals. Margaret Simons explains the changes taking place in the Australian media. She analyses audiences, our major media organisations, the role of government and the implications of all of these for our society and our democracy. Her examination leads her to the conclusion that the challenges facing the content providers in the modern world are part of a broader striving. Kinderman says he thinks the compound could be a win-win for the planet and the animals. You know, the methane is kind of a waste product, and this energy, instead of losing it for the animal, it can be reused for the animal in terms of performance, and at the same time we are doing something for greenhouse gas emission and climate change. The product's not on the market yet, toxicology tests are ongoing. Today's technological market is dominated by two contrasting business models, the generative and the non-generative. The generative models, the PCs, Windows, and Macs of this world, allow third parties to build upon and share through them. The non-generative model is more restricted. Appliances might work well, but the only entity that can change the way they operate is the vendor. Never before has the world of journalism been so explosive, so global, and so competitive. Forget hourly news flashes. We live in a world of 24-hour breaking news, with radio and TV stations and internet news sites updating stories by the minute. Karl Marx is arguably the most famous political philosopher of all time, but he was also one of the great foreign correspondents of the 19th century. During his 11 years writing for the New York Tribune, their collaboration began in 1852. Marx tackled an abundance of topics, from issues of class and the state to world affairs. In multilingual countries, code mixing, the use of more than one variety in the same utterance or sentence, and code switching, the use of different languages or varieties between sentences, is common and natural. Despite its frequency, or perhaps because of it, some scholars and self-appointed guardians of linguistic morality view both code mixing and code switching as a sign of linguistic deficiency. When buying a house, for example, it's best to let our unconscious mull over the many variables. But when we're picking stocks and shares, intuition often leads us astray. The trick is to determine when to lean on which part of the brain, and to do this, we need to think harder and smarter about how we think. Just about everyone on the planet wears at least one article of clothing made from cotton at some point during the day. Inevitably byproducts of the plant show up as well in something that person is doing. The source of cotton's power is its nearly terrifying versatility and the durable creature comforts it provides. The preparation of abstracts is an intellectual effort, requiring general familiarity with the subject. To bring out the salient points of an author's argument calls for skills and experience. Consequently, a considerable amount of qualified manpower that could be used to advantage in other ways must be diverted to the task of facilitating access to information. Most words have experienced several changes in meaning throughout their history, so that it is impossible to say which stage in their meaning is the true meaning, and if we attempt to go back to the beginning, we find it is impossible, for the origins of many words are difficult to trace back. So, as much as this is a book about the experience of traveling, the contemplation of cities that are vast in scale and villages that are as remote and strange as anything Westerners are ever likely to encounter, it is also a book that tries to describe another kind of journey. 46. Much of what people do today disguises a desperate search for meaning, the result of the crisis of belief that has become a major problem of the Western world. On the one hand, the elites and their high culture suffer a loss of confidence, and aimless consumerism is widespread. On the other, powerful new myths arise, as with sporting heroes. In the Middle Ages, the design and use of flags were considered a means of identifying social status. Flags were, therefore, the symbols not of nations, but of the nobility. The design of each flag resembled the devices on the noble's coat of arms, and the size of the flags was an indication of how high the owner stood in the nobility. Programming is the art of expressing solutions to problems so that a computer can execute those solutions. Much of the effort in programming is spent finding and refining solutions. Often, a problem is only fully understood through the process of programming a solution for it. The definition of a disaster varies by organization. Various entities have different pain thresholds that define when an incident becomes a disaster. A bank, for example, will have different criteria than a poison control hotline. With this fact in mind, any organization should begin the process of implementing first alert and response teams after it has completed a business impact analysis. Once you've picked a general topic for your paper, you need to come up with a thesis. Your thesis is the main and focal point of your paper, and it's the position you'll take on your particular topic. Formulating a strong thesis is one of the most important things you need to do to ace your paper. A unique characteristic of online shopping environments is that they allow vendors to create retail interfaces with highly interactive features. One desirable form of interactivity from a consumer perspective is the implementation of sophisticated tools to assist shoppers in their purchase decisions by customizing the electronic shopping environment to their individual preferences.